for the love and rush, the buzz, the hush. Whatever tunes your knees to mush, the hit, the lift, even if you gotta sift through the shit to get to the twist. The smile I high like it's your very last line. You'll never get another try. Do it loud, do it for the round, for the here and now.
All right, welcome everyone. This is going to be my third time using this platform. I'm still really an amateur using all this equipment, but this is, I've done a couple of interviews with Jason Miller here, and I want to lay a little groundwork. When we talk about this happening, this incident that has so much information with it, it was back in 2013, 2014. He was very new to technology, and he's new to technology now. I mean, I think all he uses is his iPad and his phone. And so when it came to technology back then, he was very limited. He never knew then how deep he would be into this subject now. So unfortunately, there's a lot of pictures that weren't taken. There's a lot of things that weren't done, but he did do a lot for that investigation that day. He did pull up a lot of info, and that's what we're going to go over tonight. And I'm telling you, there's going to be some stuff about this that's, I think it's pretty shocking that what can be uncovered if you're paying enough attention to the evidence out there. So, Jason, take us back to 2013, 2014, and how did you even find yourself up in that area?
Well, back in 2013, I had a face-to-face Class A encounter with my daughter, and it started me on this path to where I've become pretty good at what I'm doing in my area only I'm talking about. So right after I had my Class A encounter, I started a local Facebook page in my area only, just for like a little safe zone for people to contact me, share their stories, etc. And early 2014, early in spring, we had a very heavy winter that year. So in spring, around March of 2014, we had a really warm front come through. Well, mid 30s, and the snow started to melt off pretty quick. And I'm sitting at home one day, and I get a private message on Messenger through my Facebook page from a person that I don't know his name. And basically, he said, you need to come out to this particular lake. I want you to come out and check out something I found. And I'm typing back to him, explain to me. And he was not relaying the information that I was requesting. He was very vague and was adamant. Please come out. Here's where I want you to come park, and I want you to go to this lake called McDowell Lake. Now, McDowell Lake is on the Ponderay Wildlife Refuge, and it is closed during the winter to all but human activity via your feet. Cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, or just walking in. That's the only access that you can, maybe some horses every once in a while. But if you got to get back in there, you got to pump it in. So he told me, I really want you to go out to McDowell Lake. And I'm like, he's not telling me why. I I just didn't feel right, but something told me to go out there. So my gut finally just said, hey, this guy's pressing me pretty hard. Let me just go out and take a peek. I've been out there many times before. Now, during the summer, the wildlife refuge is open to the public, and there is a touring road that people from all around will drive. You can drive the nicest cars on these particular roads, but during the winter, again, they're closed. The gates are closed. So the walk into McDowell Lake is from the gate where he parked his rig to the actual lake, is 2.3 miles. Now that might not seem that far, but when you're walking in 10, 12 feet of snow, slushy snow, it's a walk. So I start coming in, and here's a picture of it during the summer. And then up at the top corner, there's the main trail coming in, and it leads down to the water. There's a little gravel boat launch. The path makes a curve, and at the top of the lake there, that's an earthen dam. So what they did is they dammed up a little creek to create this man-made lake called McDowell Lake. So it's not natural. It's just man-made for recreation. So I start walking in from my vehicle. I'm getting closer, and I'm getting closer, and I'm getting closer. And the road starts to drop down the slowly, just gentle grade. And as I'm getting probably the halfway mark, start to hear the oddest sounds coming from that direction. Now, in the wintertime, sounds can come from all around. They can bounce off mountain hillsides. They can just come up from all over the place. But this sound was coming directly from the lake itself. No doubt about it. The best way I can describe it was this really low groan sound. Just this growl, not a growl, but a groan. And I just like, I don't know what that is, but maybe that's what he called me out here for. My mind is just racing with possibilities. Now to backtrack for a second here, he contacted me over my little Facebook page. So yes, Sasquatch did come into play, just a smallest of fraction, but it wasn't in the forefront at all. So I thought he might have seen or found something like a log across the road that was not there when he came in or whatever. But anyways.
Now remember, when the gentleman sent the message to Jason, he was just like, dude, you need to go out to that lake. He didn't say anything about what he found. He's just telling Jason to go out there. So Jason is anything and everything could come into play until you know what's going on.
Correct. But once I started hearing those sounds, that's when my mind was really starting to just brainstorm, because it sounded nothing like I'd ever heard before. As I'm getting closer and closer, the sounds are amplifying. They're not consistent. They're not on a timely manner. They're just random. Some sounds are louder than the others. Some are softer. Some last longer. Some are shorter. I'm just tripping. I'm just like, what am I being set up for? Any possibilities were going through my mind, as you mentioned. So as I get to the lake, I come walking in the main road, and I get to, in this photograph, it doesn't have the U.S. Forest Service bathroom. Regardless, but when I got to the little gravel boat launch, and I stood there looking over the lake. Now I'm looking over the lake, not looking in any particular direction other than scanning way ahead, the hillsides, etc. And that's when the sounds hit again, just loud as can be. And that's when I had my aha moment.
What they sound like?
I'm sorry?
What did it sound like?
Just this loud groan. Again, not a growl, but like just a groan. I can't describe it. But not a growl. But what it ended up being was the lake had broken up real spontaneously due to the increase in temperature. So the lake, the ice on the lake had broken up into chunks, and they were grinding against each other, just like the tectonic plates in Earth. And those sheets of ice were creating that groaning sound that was just emitting from the lake. And that's when I was like, this is what he called me out here for. And wasn't upset or angry. I was just like, okay. Now, where I was standing, and in this picture, you can see there's a gravel boat launch that kind of goes to the water. And I'm at the very end of the boat launch. And in this photograph, the water level is actually higher than normal in this photograph. So the summer before, we had a very dry summer. So the water level was a lot lower than this photograph here. This would be at normal water level. But I'm standing at the boat launch, the gravel dirt boat launch, and I can see where this guy had stopped in his skis, where he had taken off his skis and he had walked maybe a few paces closer to the edge of the shoreline. Now, when I say where he stopped at was 40 yards, 45 yards from the actual ice where it met the shoreline. So he walked towards the shore or towards the ice, but stopped. I mean, in one spot. And I can see where he was just kind of going back, pacing back and forth a few feet. And then I could see where he went back up to his skis and then headed back out the way he came in. Now, as I'm standing there, overlooking these sheets of ice, and you could see the big cracks in the ice. You could kind of see a sheet moving here, very slowly, of course. I then start to look down a little bit, and from where I was standing, basically in his footprints, another 30, 25 yards was these Now, I'm going to say this, and this is my opinion, where these Sasquatch tracks were on the ice. So this here is a view from the shoreline heading out onto this giant sheet of ice, one of the pieces of the ice that was on the lake. So the dollar bill represents one track, and there's another track. What it did was it walked out onto the ice sheet, turned around, walked back to the shoreline itself. For some reason, I think it was going to take a shortcut. That there is the very first track that I could see from the actual shoreline where the gentleman had stopped. Now, I walked out onto the ice because I know I've been to this lake before. If I was to break through the ice right here, I'd be maybe knee deep. So I wasn't worried about falling through the ice or etc. Even though the weight of this being didn't break through the ice, it clearly walked out onto the ice sheet, turned around, and came back. Once it came back to the shoreline, it then headed a particular direction. Before I followed the tracks, the first thing I thought was okay, excellent picture. So in this photograph, you have the blue arrow, that's the boat launch. The dot is where I was standing, and the yellow non-dotted line is where it walked out on the ice, turned around, and came back. Now, from that, where that blue arrow is, directly below it is a red X. So before I followed the tracks heading the other direction, I went the direction of the blue arrow. I wanted to see if I could find a track line where it comes through that wooded area, because there was only, boom, one track just out of the blue. Then again, out on the ice, turned around and came back. But what sparked my curiosity was, it's as if it appeared out of nowhere. So,
okay, can I interject here?
Please.
Just for the clarity for those watching, Jason came down that boat launch area, and the gentleman who sent him the message, Jason immediately evaluated where that guy came in, where he took his skis off, and then left. So that guy was 45 yards from the ice line and never came down any closer to that. So as Jason is investigating, he's walking down to the waterline, sees these bare footprints going out onto the ice, and he's trying to determine, where did they start? And it looks like they started in the middle of nowhere. They just appeared right in that cul-de-sac area of that lake.
That is correct. 100% correct. That right there sparked my curiosity. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, but this is my opinion. I do not believe in the woo, portals, etc. I do not. I believe in what I believe, and that's my right, but I don't want to offend anybody. So I knew it had to have come from somewhere. That one footprint where it started, I then went to the tree line towards that X. And right at that X, the red X below the blue arrow, was a giant ponderosa tree. And we're talking massive. I mean, huge ponderosa tree. And at the base of the tree, there was still enough snow on the ground that there was just bark, needles, pine cones, branches, you name it, sloughed off all around the base of this tree. So I thought, there's no way. There's no, could it be? Could what I'm thinking, could this be a possibility? So from that red X and that blue arrow, I conducted I couldn't do a complete spiral because of the water line, but I looked everywhere, going outwards to every tree I could look around to see if I could find the same type of visual debris as this only one tree had. No sign at all. And we're talking, nobody has been out in this area other than this one gentleman who snow skied out there. So the snow was clean. The top layer of the snow around the bases of the trees, everything was just clean. There was a few fallen pine needles, but nothing like that red X. So that right there really, that got me.
I'm going to need to interject here. I've got to stress the importance of having a layer of snow on the ground. That is the key element to discovering what Jason discovered. If it wasn't for the snow, you'd never be able to tell. You'd never be able to tell under a tree what kind of chaos happened up in the branches of that tree. Today, he got lucky, and it shows a behavior that we've all suspected, that we've touched on this behavior as being a probability based on several things. This to me is the first time, because of the snow on the ground showing what happened, no other tree along that side of the lake had any kind of debris fall underneath it. The debris field, a debris field from something launching off a branch. Imagine it using a branch, running off and jumping off the branch. Imagine the G-forces, depending on the body weight of whatever the size of this creature was, imagine the movement of that branch and how much stuff would fall to the ground and layer on top of the snow. This is huge as far as behaviors. This is the part where I'm so excited, because it shows, to me, it's almost proof that, well, we'll just continue.
Okay. One thing I'd like to add is that, as Randy mentioned at the beginning, I'm brand new to this. So the only thing I had with me was this little generic BlackBerry phone that I could text, that I could barely use. I mean, barely figure out. But I had one of those old yellow Kodak cameras where you would take a picture and then use your thumb to scroll to the next piece of film. I only had 3 pictures left on this camera. So I wasn't expecting to find what was out there. So I apologize for not having more visuals, but I did my best. So from that X, when I stood there, I looked up and I go, that, excuse my language, beep bleep, jumped or had to have come from the canopy down onto the ground, walked out onto the ice. I believe it was trying to take a shortcut somewhere, decided, oh, I better not, turned around. And that's when it started to follow the shoreline to the next X. Now, right at that next X, where Randy has the dotted lines, before that, there is a dot. And what that dot is a culvert. So it's an overspill for this lake, so it doesn't get too much water and flood the area. So the water goes underneath that little culvert and ends up above, in this picture, into a marshy area. So right at that red dot is a culvert. Now in this photograph, it does not show the culvert. The culvert is actually how they built it. It's of course the round type culvert, but they built a square cage around it that you could walk out onto it like kind of like a mini dock. And if the water was low enough, you could fish off of it, etc. But it's not present in this photograph. Regardless, where that dot is was the last right footprint. And that last footprint was it. There was no more. I walked the remaining edge of the shore. I walked up onto the road, came back, looking for any sign that it might have crossed over into the marsh above, went back to that red dot, and then I slowly examined the last right footprint, and it was clear as day, where you could see where it had put its right heel down deeper into the snow, the front the pad of its right foot, and you could see where its toes had grasped and pushed and launched itself in conjunction, I believe, with then the left foot on top of the culvert, an additional launch all the way to that red X. So from that culvert, where that red dot is, that's 109 yards. Now imagine the distance that we can jump compared to this distance. Now, how I deduced that that was the landing spot was how I figured out the original spot, the debris field below that upper red X. The same type of sloughed material, bigger broken branches, more bark was sheared down, more pine needles, and more pine cones. So the sheer force of this big being launching through the air and slamming into that tree, I could only imagine might have felt like a car wreck against that tree if I was that tree, you know, that sheer force. So then I started again to do another. I couldn't do a complete diameter or circle search. I could only do half circle, but I looked everywhere for the same visual cues as the pre and the post. And again, as you mentioned, virgin snow, white as can be, not a single difference in any of the other trees compared to what that top red X was and the very first one. So, in my opinion, it was using the canopies, the forest limbs, the forest canopies in this area to traverse, such as primates do. And it got to a point where it was like, uh-oh, I've got to either make a decision, go around the lake using the treetops, go up and around through the marsh, or I'm just going to cut across the shoreline and then leave as least possible evidence behind as possible. And that's what this sucker did. He just left a minimal amount of sign.
All right, I'm gonna throw in a couple of things here, and if you look at the diagram and you see the dotted yellow lines is probability that it's in the air, where the dotted lines are, and it lands at the black X, and then the solid line shows where it walks out onto the ice. We're just going to assume that something happened while he was out there at the apex of that trackway where he immediately turned back towards shore. Let's just assume the ice cracked or the ice broke or something happened where it intelligently says, I need to get back to the shoreline. Now, I've seen a lot of videos where animals are caught in ice holes like deer. I've seen foxes under the ice, frozen solid. I've seen all kinds of wild animals, dogs, children. Lots of things will fall through the ice. But to backtrack when you hear a crack, is a sign of intelligence. That behavior that in the trackway that shows it made an intelligent decision because it's smart that I better not tempt this any further because of the ice is cracking. I will continue on the shoreline. That is a human-like behavior, human intelligence behavior. And it also brings me back to the fact of leaving tracks in the snow. It seems like it's a very hard thing for people to find. A lot of people go out in the snow. They're like, man, there should be tracks everywhere. You know, if there's Bigfoots in this area, there should be tracks everywhere. And I want to bring back something from my own past. My encounter at the Chickasaw Park, only after my encounter did I have a conversation with Dr. Charles Hallmark. He was the one who was baiting the trash cans, and we talked about snow. There is not much snow that ever falls in southern Oklahoma, almost to the Texas border. It is very rare. But he did tell me in a conversation that we had one time while I was at the fire station talking to him on my cell phone, he said that there was one time where there was just a small piece of snow on the ground, you know, maybe a half inch of snow. And he said he immediately went out to the park to see if he could find any tracks because it's such a rarity. And he said one of the trash cans that he had been baiting with his baiting system out there had one partial, like the ball of the foot reached out to the trash can, looked in the trash can, and only left in a patch of snow there within a 10-foot parameter of that trash can, only one front part of a foot with some toes. And he got to looking around, and where it came in was the road, and there was no snow on the road. The snow had melted on the road. And he said, and I wasn't ready to wrap my head around this kind of intelligence at the time. But when he said it came down the road so that you wouldn't be able to see his tracks, and then stepped to the trash can with a half footprint, I wasn't ready to accept the kind of intelligence that would suggest. But now, after hearing this, I've done a full 180 from where I was then to where I am now about their intelligence, about leaving tracks where not necessary. And now I think there's clear evidence of using the canopy more than we know to travel. It's fascinating. And I'm sorry to interject like this, but you're gonna have to let me just get excited when I'm excited.
Let's go. So, yes, I sat there for most of the day, going back and forth, double, triple checking everything. It all made sense. All made sense. So I got to get home. It's getting dark. So my plan was to come back the next day to cast 2 of those prints in the snow because they were perfect. I mean, I couldn't have asked for better tracks. So I get home, I get all my casting material, and I can't sit still. I'm just wound up, just excited as can be. But I had a thought. Now, the reason why I'm stating this is I'm technology dumb still to this day, as you mentioned. So I get on our computer, the tower computer with the monitor, and I start looking up on search engines, I use the term Sasquatch only, but Bigfoot, shoes, sandals, slippers, any type of wordage I could put in to come back with products that somebody could have bought back in that day that could have snuck out there. And I'm alluding to this guy, the snow skier, playing a hoax on me. So I had to rule that out. I had to rule that out as best as possible. And at this particular time, maybe it was just me, but I found nothing at the time that you could buy that you could slip on or use that would have created such a perfect set of footprints. Left, right, left, right, etc. And again, the gentleman was too far from where he stopped, took off his skis, to have been able to slip on a pair of hoaxing material and then get out onto the ice without leaving a single bit of evidence. That would have been obvious to anybody, but there was zero hoaxing involved that in my opinion, I ruled it out, completely ruled out hoaxing. And
we have a question. We have a question, if you don't mind me throwing out there. Chris Nichols asked, and the X where the creature left the canopy and landed in that cove. Did you do any searches going back into that wood line and to find out where it maybe have went up into the canopy to begin its journey?
So, great question. Where it landed, I went at least a quarter mile in a rainbow. I couldn't do a complete spiral pattern, but I did a rainbow search pattern, a quarter mile back the direction that it leaped. Now, here's to add on to your question. I believe it was wanting to head south. The original direction was heading on the ice. So from that red X, I followed the shoreline all the way to the end of the lake, which in this photograph, this is pretty much, there's just a little bit more of this lake towards the bottom, but I walked the shoreline all the way around and I searched the whole area, a quarter mile outwards, which would have been northeast. Then as I come back, I ended up walking back all the way around the lake to the first X where it landed. I mean, where it originated from. So there we go. So I had walked the whole lake to the very bottom, around, and came back up. And in this, let me put my meters on here. Excuse me, everybody. So there is at the top of the map, there's a little bubble out. That's a marshy area. But I went all the way around, all the way up to that road, and I covered every bit of that timber. Road down to the shoreline, road down shoreline, road down to the bottom, and then all the way back up to my original spot. So I covered 100% of that lake, especially the northeast corner, because I thought it was trying to head, like, cut down southeast in this photograph. So to answer your question, I believe I covered every square inch that I could with the time that I had.
Wow. So, yeah, that also Leah is asking a question. Did you discover any hairs in any of the tracks?
This time of year, we have a lot of tree moss, and the tree moss does look like hairs if you look at it from a glance, but there was no. Answer's no. I looked.
All right. Well,
but again, that wasn't on my mind. No, I did see the moss from the wind blowing it, etc. But that wasn't something that I was actually looking at that particular time. I did think about it, but I was more interested in figuring out the original spot and blown away just by the fact that it walked out on the ice and back. So it was further back in my mind.
Well, let's go over some of the tracks. So we're going to start out with, the first track that you measured,
Yep.
and you can clearly see the toes, and that came from this Trackway. And now let's go over some other snow features and other tracks that make a difference in what you're looking at.
There we go.
So I would certainly say, man, that sure looks like footsteps to me going up the center, but indeed that's not human steps or what. So what's going on there, Jason?
What you got there is you got in the same area, same time of year, roughly the same temperatures, you have moose tracks. So those are double step moose tracks that are now expanding as they melt. It's called blowing out. So if at first glance you would look at it and you would think that looks like how a person would walk, left, right, left, right. Well, the size of the moose, that's how they leave their tracks. And as they melt, they blow out and expand, and it plays tricks on the mind. There's an example right there. Somebody would see that and think, here is a footprint. And the easiest way to figure out what animal, an ungulate, you reach down in there and you can just gently manipulate with your fingertips, and you can feel the two hooves where they have left their heaviest impression in the snow or sometimes even in the soil, because it's the coldest part and hasn't started to really blow out yet as the upper layer of the snow. That's the same track line. Now we got your bear track, which that bear track was within 2 days old, but we're now right now in the 40 degrees. So it had stepped in it the day prior. And as I'm coming back, it's now starting to expand and melt outwards. And at first glance, you might think that that's just a short little footprint with the toes. But if you get down and you can start to put your fingers down in there, and then you can also start to see the claws. So you got to really do a lot of looking. And there's just the classic bear track in mud. They'll leave a double step, and sometimes the pad of the foot might slide in the slippery mud and leave an elongated rear pad look, and then the toes. Now, those are just a few examples of tracks and different substrate. Thank you. So this is an example. I pulled this off the internet. I don't know who takes credit for this, so this is not mine. But you have what I call, or they call, the classic Sasquatch footprint on the left in the gray. On the right, we've got your classic human anatomical print. And what really messes people up is this. They might be similar in looking and appearance, but you should always look for the arch. The arch is our spring. Our body has a built-in spring device. So the arch in the curvature, which is void in the one on the left, some say they have the ability to have the mid-tarsal break. That's just a quote-unquote assumption. But one thing I can say for sure is, and I want to explain this to a lot of people when they look at prints in the snow, the mud, on the ground. Western society, we love to put shoes on our children at an early age. Baby feet come out, baby feet, big old chunky feet. They're able to graspings, they suck on their toes, etc. But they almost look like little tiny baby Sasquatch feet until they start to develop into the normal pattern. But in Western society, one way to rule out human versus non-human is we put our children in shoes at an early age, which starts to turn all of our toes inwards. So your right foot, all your toes might have a gentle sloping curve inwards. Your left foot, the toes have a gentle curve inwards. Not pigeon-toed, but we're talking about the anatomy of the bone structure. And our toes are tight together, tight in shoes. They're squeezed. So over time, as you go through puberty and your bones grow, etc., they retain that curvature. Now, not everybody does, but the majority of Western civilization, that's how our feet are developed due to our Western footwear.
Now, one good example of that is go back to the ancient practice of the Japanese women of foot binding,
Exactly.
where how tiny they would bind up the feet. And over time, that's just the way it ends up being these squished up little tiny feet. So ours is certainly not that extreme, but our feet would naturally want to grow and spread out a little bit wider at the top end where our toes would spread out. But we keep them so bound throughout our life that's how most of our feet turn out.
Absolutely. So when I was stationed in Panama, we had time to go out in the jungle and play with the toys. Well, there would be the locals out there who lived off the land who were barefoot all the time. And I've seen some funky feet. I've seen some feet that looked so abnormal due to their environment. They're going to develop in a certain way depending on where they live. But
yes. Now let's let's go back to the map here and keep your thought processes on the entrance and the exit that this creature made into this scene and the distance in the air that it traveled when it jumped.
Gotcha.
I spent several hours last night scouring BFRO reports, trying to find storylines that involved great distances being jumped. Some are more believable than others, but there was one that I found from the state of Oregon where two college-age guys were hiking and they came upon some big footprints that were larger than their shoes. They thought somebody may have been playing a joke on them, and they kept worming their way up this mountain, and they got to a point where the tracks stopped. And he said there was about an 8-foot distance. The distance between these tracks were quite distant. And they got to a point where they were zigzagging up this mountain and they come to the tracks and they stopped. That's where they ended. And he said you could tell where the thing had turned around and was facing downhill, like it heard them coming. And all of a sudden there was no tracks anywhere. So they start looking around, and on the uphill side, up an 8 or 10 foot embankment behind some shrubs, there's some snow rolling down the hill where this thing jumped from the road, in the middle of a road, up off the side of the road, up an 8 or 10 foot embankment, up above that into the shrubs. So it cleared probably 20 feet from a dead standstill. That to me sounds believable, especially since they saw snow tumbling down the hill where it must have been, and they took off because they were spooked. So I read a couple of stories like that where some great distance was jumped. And then jumping off of a water tower. I read that one time where one was seen jumping off a water tower and hit the ground running. You don't understand G-forces. I mean, if you're a trained medic like Jason is, and fire service, medic like myself, you understand trauma to the bone and things like that. And the G-forces applied, most people jump 10, 12 feet, and then their knees buckle and their legs break. That is a very short distance to our little frail bone structure with not much muscle. But we are going to be talking about the distance that these things can jump and the reasons why.
Correct. So from that first X, where I believe it jumped to the first footprint, I measured it to just at 70 yards from the canopy to that first dot. That six. I'm always rounding things up, so I'm just going to say 70 yards. What really got me thinking was that if it had jumped the direction of that blue arrow, that's not how it landed. It landed with its first right foot facing that yellow line outwards. So it seemed to have pivoted in the air, if that makes any sense at all. Instead of landing with its feet pointing towards the direction it was going, it landed with its feet, with its first right foot facing the lake.
So think about the way Spider-Man would hit the ground.
There you go. Exactly. It's a great analogy. I was going to use another superhero as an analogy coming up here. Excellent. So,
let's go to the reasons why that their body would be capable of that kind of stress on a regular basis.
Exactly. Okay. So this is a Belgian blue cow. Belgian blue cows do nothing but sit and graze and absolutely become nothing but, let's just put it as steak. What they have is they have a deficiency in their DNA called a myostatin deficiency. And what that does is it stops the body at a certain point from developing any further muscles. It allows it to continue to grow muscle upon muscle upon muscle. So if you have this myostatin deficiency, you can be extremely muscular without even touching a weight. We're talking bodybuilder type, just gargantuan looking. Exactly. Now this gentleman is obviously full of performance enhancing drugs. I'm not going to call them natural by no means, but this is a comparison to the Patty footage, a clip. So you can see the calf structure in her leg. You can see the well-deformed hamstrings, her massive buttocks. Now remember, our buttocks is the largest muscle group in the human body.
And you can even see the same tendon that goes down and connects at the knee that comes through the hamstring.
Correct. Exactly. So could it be possible that these beings, now I've been up close to a juvenile, arm's length almost, just a little bit further. And this juvenile was so massively well built, muscular wise, at such an early young age that it's as if they're born with this over extended growth of their muscles just naturally. So the human body, I'm not going on a long rant here. We have roughly 14% of our body mass is bone. Of a normal human body, 14% is bone. The rest is muscle, water, etc. So if you take the average human body of 175 pounds and kind of do the math of an 800-pound being, it comes out to about 46% bone mass of the total weight of the animal. That's almost half of the animal could be possible bone. And then what's attached to the bone? You've got your ligaments and tendons and your muscles that create, as you mentioned, such an extreme ability to produce a G-force or enough power to spring itself, regardless of the size, such a great distance. I mean,
well, this is to me, your explanation of what you found here opens up the door that indeed they are jumping these extreme distances, maybe with ease. I don't know how easy it is for them, but and if that's the case, how many times are they doing it when you don't, and you don't realize it? A lot of people say, oh, the prints just disappeared, or they started from the middle of nowhere and blah, 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 blah. But I don't know how intricate they go into examining the area like you did. So I can't take somebody's word for it. I almost need to see it myself and see all of the details and see what might have been overlooked. But the fact is, we are learning things now about Neanderthal and things like that. When they find some of these bones and they talk about and they've laid these side by sides, like a femur bone laid side by side to one of our bones, and it's like 2.5 times as thick. So they're saying even in Neanderthals, which is our predecessors or our ancestors, the bone structure was so thick, and bone thickness is only interpreted by muscle attachment, because it needs to be able to handle the torque, as much torque as the muscles is going to. So they were extremely muscular, according to the bone size. So I'm telling you, these things are using the canopy. This here just about proves it to me beyond a shadow of a doubt. And now the question is, how often do they use the canopy? If they're up there 50% of the time, you're going to certainly see less evidence on the ground. What if they're up there 80% of the time and traveling around 80% of the time, and you only occasionally find 1 or 2 tracks where they're dropping between trees before they go back airborne into the canopy? This is a wonderful explanation of some of the intricacies of track finds and why are they so difficult to find and why are they so rare? Well, because they may not hit the ground too often.
That's right. Now, I had this happen to me in person with a witness a couple years later. And we were talking earlier about how you wanted to hear this firsthand. Well, here we go. So I was with 2 guys and we were out elk hunting. Now, we were not out researching. We were strictly elk hunting. So we had Sasquatch not on the mind. So I posted up one of my friends down lower. I posted up my other guy in one spot, and I didn't want him to move from this one particular spot. Stay right here. Well, I walked down, came back, and I was going to kick up this herd of elk. And 99.9% of the time, they always go this one direction. Well, this 0.1% of the time, they decided to go a different direction. So I end up coming back, sneak around, and I come up to my buddy who was higher up on this ridgeline. What he was overlooking was where a little draw of trees came to a point, and then from that point, the last tree, it was nothing in his field of vision. So we're standing there whispering, we're talking. Then all of a sudden, in front of us at the biggest tree at the end of this draw, up in the canopy was the loudest tree break, just crunch up in the air. Now, we didn't have Sasquatch on the mind. So I told my buddy, go down and up, and I'm going to follow you. So we're going to go parallel, looking down into this draw for what might have made that noise. We get to a certain spot, we turn around and we come back. Just below that big tree where that massive crash was at was a game trail. Now, the sun had just come up a little earlier, and that game trail went from frozen mud to now you could leave a print. And right at the base of that tree was a perfect Sasquatch print in the mud. And we had nothing to cast it with. Nothing. So I believe the whole time my buddy was standing, posting up in this spot, there was, now it wasn't a big one, but I believe there was a medium size or junior size sitting in the tree watching him the whole time, and just happened to maybe like lost his grip or the limb broke. And he waited for us to walk out of his field of vision or its field of vision, and then came down and boogied off. So I believe that a lot of the times they're up in the canopies and we're sitting there wasting our time looking on the ground. But it's so hard to be looking up at the canopies because it's so, in my area, it's just nothing but a green field. It'd be next to impossible.
Remember on Predator, on the movie Predator, where Arnold Schwarzenegger was up in the trees, and when the Predator was making some movements around, he was just hugging the tree, motionless.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. I thought about that last night. I sure did. But so once that this, I got home that night, I did my research. I went back the next day and I tried to cast the prints in the snow. It just blew out. The snow just blew out the tracks. I've learned now what to use and how to do it, etc. But those are all learning experiences I had starting out. Less than 1 year from my first Class A. Well, I had two within a 24-hour period, but this was less than a year from my mind going from skeptic to I'm in this as long as I can. So this is a learning process. Wrong type of camera to use, wrong casting material, etc. So we learn as we go. And then that started my wintertime excursions, which I hit pretty hard for the next 10 years, trying to find areas where they would. So this, great picture. So this is one of my little, I guess, just hides. It's where I would stay during the winter. They're massive granite boulders, some of them size of school buses. We would cache food, gear inside there, and we would stay in these. We would stay in here for 2 to 3 days minimum, and we would just scour the areas looking for what. And I need to reiterate something. This is around lakes. This isn't just random spots. I was trying to recreate what I found out at the McDowell Lake. So I was concentrating around other bodies of water that were frozen to see if the same pattern would be reproduced, where if they would come down and then not cross the lake or etc. But I spent about a good 10 years trying to reproduce around frozen lakes what occurred in McDowell.
All right. Well, there we go. All right. Well, we've got 27 people in here, and I got to tell you, this is my third time using this platform. This is the most people I've seen in 3 times that I've tried to use this. Great. Now I'm banned from YouTube. What? It's Pyromedic. So it looks like it reported one of his comments. I don't know what that's all about. I never saw a comment.
Oh, great.
I may have curse words as non. It gave me. I do have a list of curse words that I don't allow on written comments. So maybe if you accidentally put in a curse word, you might get charged with a felony on that from YouTube. But I don't know. I was just trying to keep it clean. So I guess just keep it clean on your own, and then you won't have to have me beat you over the head with the grammar stick.
Hey, and if it's towards me, don't bother me at all. I know it occurred.
Right. Yeah, Ray. Jason's interview with the family in Washington, that was great.
Yes.
Ray also asked, Jason, do you have a channel, or do you have? I mean, I'm assuming she's asking if you have like a YouTube or anything like that. But if you want to give out your information, I know it's specifically for Northeast Washington location, but if you accept other people on there, maybe you can throw that out there.
Of course, I don't have a YouTube channel. I just prefer to have my own little Facebook page. Anybody's welcome. I share my findings, and that's how I connect with people from all over the place when they want to talk to me over Messenger or over the phone. And it's called Northeast Washington Sasquatch Society on Facebook. You'll see my ugly mug on there, and click on that, and let's have talk behind closed doors. Or
and then you'll have ways to connect with him through Messenger or email and things like that. Whatever's listed on that page as a way to communicate with him, he can do that. So I would like to throw this out there that I enjoy the intellectual conversations that I've been having with Jason ever since we met. This is in my field of what I like in this arena. And if he ever goes out and does an investigation, takes lots of videos, takes lots of measurements, takes notes, writes in a journal, all that stuff. If he wants to come to me and we will say, look, I think having a little subset of my channel where it's just Jason, called Jason B. Miller Investigates, and then if he wants to show things that until he ever gets comfortable enough to maybe doing it on his own, I'd love to kind of give him a little launch pad where this week we've got an episode of Jason Miller Investigates, and here's where he went, here's what he did, and here's what he uncovered. I think that'd be fantastic.
I'm pondering it. We'll see. I like sharing what I find on my page, sharing it with guests or being a guest. You've got me hooked. You've got me really thinking about it, but I can't commit yet.
I hear you. Ray, the Northeast Bigfoot and Paranormal Research Group. No, it's not that. It's Northeast Washington Sasquatch
Society. Correct. So,
all right. Well, until Jason can commit, we'll just keep having these. If he ever has another one where he just finds something spectacular, I'll talk him into coming on so we can talk about it. So I guess that's about where this thing will end. We're a little over an hour. I think we covered the subject really well. I'm telling you guys, these things they jumped from the trees and they jumped back into the trees. And I think what Jason found proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I do think the distance from where it jumped is pretty extreme, but then again, if it can jump 20 feet up a 30 or 40 degree grade behind some shrubs from just a standstill, who knows what it's capable of as it's running and then can launch itself. Jason and I were talking about it. Remember, Michael Jordan could run down the court dribbling the ball and launch himself in the air from the top of the key and then dunk from a 15-foot jump and still be high enough in the air where he could dunk the ball. So think of that kind of behavior from weak little human beings and then transpose that over into the capabilities of the physical structure of one of these beings, maybe you can triple that distance, at least triple that distance, and maybe double the height in the air. It's just fantastic. And now we can just take that as a proven. I think this video proves that this is happening. To what degree can we keep finding this? You're really going to have to pay attention. You're really going to have to look at the details, because that's where it all begins. These things are not going to. It's just not going to show, especially if there's not snow on the ground. I don't know how you'd ever find how any of this happened if there wasn't snow on the ground, other than the footprints if they would have been in mud, and that's it. So fantastic.
Correct. I would like to state one thing. Earlier, you mentioned about Spider-Man, and the best analogy that I can describe that distance, 109 yards with a laser rangefinder, round up to 110, is when you watch the Marvel show, the Hulk, and he takes one or two steps and then he jumps up in the air and he snatches a helicopter out the air. You know, just that massive amount of power to spring. That's the best way. When I saw that years ago, I kind of was like, I think I stopped the movie and I said, that's how it did it. Because that's exactly what, in my mind, 1, 2, and then was either wrapped itself around the base of the tree or was able to grab some of the lower branches and climb up in, and left the debris field in one spot. Then from that spot, it was able to traverse without leaving any other massive amounts of debris. So I don't know which direction it went, but I do know it hit that one tree with a lot of force.
Well, I mean, even if, let's just say one of these beings weighed, let's just say 400 pounds, 400 to 600 pounds, any kind of branch, no matter how stable or sturdy you think that branch is, there's going to be a lot of give when that kind of G-forces hits it with force, and it bends down and snaps back up, and then it pulls itself. There's going to be a lot of debris fall off that limb and out of the tree at that particular spot. But once it's up there, there's no longer forces like that applied to the rest of the tree, so it can travel through the trees without leaving that debris field.
That's it. Exactly.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Please, I'm a smaller channel. It's growing. I love having these discussions where we learn something. And if you would share this, I mean, I know it's asking a lot, but it really helps. I don't put out a video every day. I don't put out a video every week. There's a lot of shows out there that for some reason, they have to pump them out and put them on a shelf every few days to build up. I don't do that. I wait until I have something of high quality that we can all learn something from. So that means I'm going to be a slower growing channel, but you can help me if you would share this on your channel so that other people can watch it. My heart goes out to you, and I thank you. I thank you so much. So, all right, buddy, Jason, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see you in a few weeks, and we are going to have so much fun.
Let's get it on.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
For the heat